Hello, everyone. This is Alpha Omega. Today, we're going to take a look at Virgin Galactic. A few days ago, its stock price doubled. Of course, it ended up closing with a 40% increase. But let's take a look at why the stock price went up so much. So then, will this upward trend in the stock price continue in the future?
Let's think about that as well.
Today, I'll explain based on the investor materials they sent out on May 15th, 2025. First of all, there was a particularly interesting slide in those materials, so I brought it here. What they're making right now is where Delta will be included. But besides Delta, there was something strange included here. During the conference call, they explained what they're planning to do here. Usually, what is it? They're saying that we can do defense-related work here. According to the news, what did they talk about here? Who did the Virgin Galactic representatives meet with? I met with officials from the Department of Defense. And then, they met with people from the aerospace defense sector. What did they talk about when they met? You know, our aircraft. They said that the mothership could be helpful to them. They basically said, if you have any payloads you want, we can carry them up and do something with them. So, what they're talking about here is the Golden Dome Initiative. What is this Golden Dome Initiative? So, the Golden Dome Initiative refers to a defense system that uses radars, missiles, and even aircraft to protect the entire United States. They're basically saying, wouldn't we be able to contribute to this system in some way? That's what they said, kind of making their case and trying to appeal to them. It might also be good to note that they brought this up to people involved in national defense. Next, there's a mention of a collaboration with Virgin Galactic, and Italy comes up in the conversation. So right now, they're conducting a feasibility study. So, right now, they're working together with the Italian Civil Aviation Authority. In addition, they're also collaborating with a company called Alltech, which is involved in aerospace logistics, and they're currently investigating whether commercial flights can be operated in Italy. So, it's divided into Phase 1 and Phase 2, and basically, if both Phase 1 and Phase 2 are completed successfully, then they'll probably get the green light. That means, in the end, it looks like they'll be able to start commercial operations with Delta here in the fall of 2026. But what I'm wondering now is, they're building 2 Deltas at the moment. So, are they going to send one of them to Italy? If that's the case, their revenue in the US would have to drop significantly. Because they need both units to generate revenue, but if they send one away, their revenue will naturally decrease by that amount. Or, are they planning to build an additional new unit besides these 2? But it costs about $60 million to build just one Delta. But right now, they only have about $560 million in cash. So their cash runway is actually very short. That means it doesn't really seem likely they'll build a new unit. So, in any case, we don't know yet whether this will actually work out in 2026 or not. Well, in my opinion, I'm not sure. Let's just leave it at this for now. If there's any news about it in the future, I'll cover it then. I think it's a bit premature to make any predictions right now. Anyway, I'll wrap it up here and move on. Now, next, the financial results came out, and as you all know, revenue has dropped significantly. So, revenue was $0.5 million, but that's because we're not running commercial operations right now. Also, this time, operating expenses did decrease a bit. It went from $113 million to $89 million, and that's roughly what we got and spent. It means we cut back a bit on R&D. But instead, we spent a lot of money on manufacturing assets. So, what they're saying here is that they spent quite a bit of money on manufacturing facilities to make the Delta, and also to be able to repair the Delta quickly when it breaks down. So, the net loss, just the net loss, was recorded at $83 million. The reason the net loss decreased compared to the same period last year is because we reduced our operating expenses. That's how we can sum it up. Now, we also raised $31 million in cash, and this was through aftermarket equity, in other words, by issuing shares and raising funds in the stock market. Just keep that in mind. Now, as of the first quarter of 2025, the free cash flow was $122 million. That's a negative number. And then, in their guidance, they said that in the next quarter as well, they expect to incur a loss of about $105 to $115 million, and they said that right now, they have $567 million in cash and cash equivalents. So, if you just do a simple calculation, assuming their net loss is about $100 million per quarter, they have enough cash runway to last about 5 quarters. And in my opinion, that cash runway is really short. It's only about a year. That's why they need to quickly increase their revenue by 2026 to cover these losses. Otherwise, they'll have to issue more shares, which would lead to further stock dilution. That's really not a good thing, right? Let's move on. So, they're talking about the milestones for 2025 and 2026. What are they going to do in the remaining part of 2025? They're going to build the Delta and run tests. And next spring, they'll fully assemble the Delta and do a test flight. And in the summer, they're going to fly with scientists on board. That's when they'll start generating revenue. And in the fall, they'll take civilians on board and make more money. So, what's important here? In order to generate good revenue in 2026, their test flights need to be completed successfully. If this gets delayed, then everything else will be delayed, too. If that happens, the stock price will probably drop again. Just something to keep in mind. And now, I'm going to talk a bit about Virgin Galactic's earnings call. What was discussed during Virgin Galactic's earnings call, and what questions did they get from investors? Let me break this down for you. First of all, Virgin Galactic revealed that they have about 300,000 potential customers. But they also mentioned that when Delta comes out, they'll start small, operating on a limited scale at first, and then gradually increase the number of Delta planes to scale up their operations. Just keep that in mind. This photo here is from last year, 2024, when they took a Turkish scientist and 3 civilians on board. But what's funny about this? Out of these, the 3 civilians, not the scientist, have booked another flight. So what this means is, once people have experienced flying on this spacecraft, they can't forget it, and the company has managed to bring those customers back. That shows just how appealing the experience is. Of course, they're currently expecting around 300,000 customers, but it's possible that people who have already flown on this spacecraft might want to do it again. That means there could end up being even more customers than just 300,000. And as they produce more Delta spacecraft in the future and their fixed costs decrease, the ticket price, which is currently $600,000, could also go down. If that happens, they could attract even more customers going forward. I'll leave it at that for now. Now, next, they talk about the supply chain and tariffs. So, for long lead items that they need to produce in the long term, they said they've already placed orders for those from overseas, so the impact of tariffs on them is minimal. They also mentioned Canadian wood, which is needed for shipping our parts. They said that, although it might not be a huge amount, the impact of tariffs on this is also negligible. So, you can keep that in mind as well. Now, moving on, when asked about how we plan to manage our cash burn, we said that the peak investment period, which required the most money, is already over. So, there won't be any major expenses going forward. Why is that? Because our heavy tooling expenses are already behind us. This heavy tooling refers to the mass production space, specifically for spacecraft. In other words, we've already brought in all the facilities needed for large-scale aircraft manufacturing. So, we explained that there won't be any significant expenses from now on. So, they said that by the 4th quarter of 2024, they're going to reduce spending to below $100 million. First, we'll have to wait and see if this actually works out. And then, in 2026, they plan to start service with 2 aircraft. And so, from here, they're saying that they'll start receiving pre-flight payments in advance. That means, in any case, revenue will start coming in, and they mentioned that revenue will be generated, so I think it would be good to clarify that point as well. So, looking at it in the long term, they're currently projecting an annual revenue of $450 million and an EBITDA of $90 to $100 million. That's a profit. It's not a loss. That's what they're currently expecting. So, how much was our revenue this time? It was $0.5 million. But if the annual revenue hits $450 million, then this $0.5 million will turn into $110 million in revenue. that's something you might want to keep in mind as well. Offer rate, if we turn a profit, that too will come out to about $100 million. And then, this is a long-term thing. They said it's long-term. Now, what else is there? In this presentation, they didn't mention the backlog. When we talk about backlog, we're referring to potential customers who have said they'll use or ride their airplane service. That hasn't been announced yet, but once they start commercial operations, they'll probably announce the backlog. Just keep in mind that they're likely to count about 1 to 2 years' worth of revenue as backlog. So, potentially, that's 125 annual flights. They're saying they'll fly the plane 125 times a year. And there are 6 passengers per flight. So in the end, that means 750 customers are paying, and if you do the math, that's where the $450 million comes from. So they're currently projecting $450 million per year, which would be $110 million per quarter. But it's not clear whether this is being done with just 1 plane or with 2 planes. According to what was announced before, each Delta plane can carry 6 people. So, for each flight, that would generate $3.60 million in revenue. And they said that they can fly 96 times a year. So, if you do the math, if we're talking about 2 planes, that means a total of 1,176 customers can be carried. Of course, we pay $600,000 to Aero for each flight, but they said they're going to raise that. But even if you calculate it conservatively, if you multiply 1,176 by $600,000, you get $705 million. So, per quarter, that's about $176 million in revenue. But honestly, that's just wishful thinking. If things actually turn out this way, if that kind of revenue really comes in, the stock price would skyrocket, but that's still a long way off. So just keep that in mind, as a reference. Now, let me sum things up a bit. I have 3 thoughts on this, and I'll just go ahead and call them risks. First of all, what are the risks? Well, as they develop Delta, safety issues could arise. So, even if they're aiming for 2026, something could happen that causes delays. Next, let's say they do launch Delta. Then, after launching the mothership, it might need repairs. Delays in revenue and flight schedules could happen because of these repairs. And earlier, our team talked about some kind of business partnership with the Italian side, but personally, I think we shouldn't spend money on that. So for now, I personally think the most important thing for them is to focus on successfully launching 2 Delta flights in the US and making money as quickly as possible. Next, the Delta aircraft hasn't even been assembled yet. And since it hasn't been assembled, they haven't been able to do any test flights either. If something goes wrong here, if they fail, the stock price could drop. I think the market will react pretty sensitively to that. And finally, the $560 million in cash they have is definitely not enough. That's something you should also keep in mind. So, the bottom line is, don't rush. Of course, right now, look at the stock price. It went up by 100%. But now, as you can see here, it's come all the way down. What that means is that everyone who was stuck at this price range has sold and gotten out. They've sold and left, and even though it's still up here, there could be more people who can't wait any longer and decide to sell for a profit. So, my opinion is that I hope you don't rush into buying Virgin Galactic or anything like that. This time, starting in June, they've decided to share videos of assembling their Delta aircraft every 2 weeks. So, it looks like they'll be providing updates every 2 weeks. And if you go on YouTube, especially on your computer, you can watch with subtitles. I just wanted to suggest that it might not be a bad idea to check out their current progress together as well. So, I've talked about various things regarding Virgin Galactic, but I'll wrap it up for you here. I'll be back after organizing information on the next company. Thank you.